Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're not just reading a book. We are effectively unearthing a manifesto.
Yeah, that is a good way to put it.
We're looking at a text that describes itself not as a polite critique, but as a weapon. A rebellion for men who are, frankly, just tired of apologizing for their existence.
It is definitely a heavy hitter. We are diving into bigotry, leftist ideologues, married to Marxist utopianism by Conrad Riker. And right off the bat, if you are listening to this and you enjoy this kind of ultra long, incisive, and a fascinating breakdown of culture.
The stuff that usually gets glossed over, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Please take a second to like and subscribe to the show. It helps us keep finding these explosive sources.
Absolutely. Hit that subscribe button right now because you are going to want to hear this one through to the very end. So this book, Riker isn't pulling any punches here at all.
Not even a little bit.
The core thesis is pretty intense. He's arguing that the history of our major institutions, like our schools, the courts, the media, that they've been effectively captured by a very specific blend of feminist and Marxist ideology. And the goal, according to Riker, is to deliberately cage and silence strong men.
Yeah, and for the listener tuning in right now, our learner profile, you might be someone who's felt a shift in the air over the last decade. Maybe you're, prepping for a meeting and terrified to say the wrong thing.
Or just looking at the world and thinking, when did masculinity become the enemy?
Right, and Riker's argument is that you aren't crazy. You aren't imagining it. You are, in his exact words, being hunted.
Which is a chilling way to start. But we promise a deep dive, so let's get into the actual machinery of how he says this happened.
Let's do it.
Before we do, I just want to mention that if this topic is already resonating with you, this book is available right now.
Yeah.
You can go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and pick up Bigotry, Leftist Ideologues, Married to Marxist Utopianism.
Yeah, what we're doing today is really just a taste. The full text is the armory.
It really is. So let's look at the first mechanism Riker identifies. He calls it the iron cage.
Right, the iron cage. This is essentially the psychological and educational trap that society is supposedly built around men. Riker argues that we've seen a complete flip in cultural values.
Like a reversal of what used to be considered good.
Exactly. If you look at the history of our institutions before this ideological capture occurred, society used to value traits like stoicism, strength, leadership. Those were the bedrock of civilization.
And now...
Now those exact traits are labeled toxic. And he points specifically to a major turning point in 2018 with the American Psychological Association, the APA.
Oh, I remember this. These were the guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men, right? It caused a massive controversy.
Yes, exactly. Riker highlights that these guidelines effectively pathologized traditional masculinity. They explicitly labeled things like ambition, leadership, and emotional restraint as harmful.
Wow.
And what's fascinating here is that Riker argues this created what he calls a therapy trap.
Okay, unpack that a bit. What is the therapy trap?
The book posits that modern therapy is designed to cripple men by forcing them into emotionalism rather than action.
Right. He draws this really interesting comparison between the ancient Stoics, guys like Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, and modern therapy culture.
Yeah, and there's a specific anecdote in the book that really stuck out. He talks about a veteran who had survived combat.
Right, held his friends while they were dying.
Exactly. But when he went for help back home, he refused to cry in a therapy circle.
And because he wouldn't cry, the system labeled him repressed.
Repressed, right. Riker's point is that for many men, action is therapy. Solving the problem is the cure. Protecting your family is the cure.
But the system demands this performance of vulnerability that actually feels unnatural to them.
It's forcing a square peg into a round hole and then medicating the peg when it doesn't fit.
It's like the system has decided that the only healthy way to be human is to process things the way women typically do.
Precisely. And the author points out that this bias isn't just happening in a therapist's office. It starts way earlier, which leads us directly into the education system.
The schoolhouse surrender.
Yes, the schoolhouse surrender.
This part is wild. He talks about how boys are being medicated for ADHD at rates that are just skyrocketing compared to girls.
The statistics he cites are staggering, but it's the specific examples that really drive it home. He talks about a boy who could sit for 3 hours straight and build a complex Lego Millennium Falcon.
Right. Total focus, zero issues. He has the patience, The spatial reasoning, the dedication.
But then you put him in a literacy class where he has to sit perfectly still and listen to a lecture.
And suddenly he's fidgeting and he's disruptive.
Exactly. And the solution isn't let him move or let him build, it's give him Ritalin.
Give him drugs. Riker argues that normal boy behavior, high energy, a desire to grapple or move, is now literally treated as a disease.
He also mentions the no-touch policies in schools.
Oh yeah, where games like tag or wrestling are completely banned.
Right. The author's argument is that this doesn't create safety, it creates anxiety. It tells boys that their natural physical instincts are dangerous weapons that just have to be suppressed.
So you have psychology trapping them and the schools medicating them. But then Riker zooms out to the culture at large. And this is where he talks about the great erasure, the rewriting of history.
Yeah, he relates this to damnatio memoria.
The Roman practice, right?
Exactly, erasing someone entirely from memory. Roker argues there was a deliberate campaign to destroy male heroes so that boys have no one to look up to. Because if you destroy the archetype, you leave the boy directionless.
And we see this with the statues. He lists them out: Colston, Columbus, Robert E. Lee. But it's not just the controversial historical figures.
No, he talks about schools being renamed too. Lincoln, Washington.
It feels like a purge,
Yeah.
according to Book.
It's a total reframing. Riker brings up the 1619 Project extensively here. His view is that this project shifts the narrative of the nation's founding from 1776, a date of independence and stoic rebellion.
To 1619, framing the whole American experiment through the lens of slavery and guilt.
Right. And his point is, if the founding fathers are just villains, then a young boy looking for a model of leadership in history just finds shame.
There was that story about the science fair project, too, which I found crazy. The kid who did a project on Tesla and Edison.
Yeah, and he was told they were problematic.
Problematic. And they were replaced in the curriculum by activists.
Riker's point isn't that we shouldn't learn about diverse figures, it's that we are actively removing the great men of history, the inventors, the conquerors, the builders.
Because their masculinity is viewed as a threat.
Exactly. And it leaves boys with a vacuum where their heroes used to be.
It's like they're systematically dismantling the great man theory of history and replacing it with a great guilt theory.
That's a really good way to put it. And once you've dismantled the history, Riker argues you can start dismantling daily interactions. Which brings us to the double standards.
Right. The chivalry conspiracy.
Yeah.
This is a really provocative concept. I think a lot of guys listening probably feel this intuitively, but haven't put a name to it.
The basic idea is that men are punished whether they act or they don't act. Riker cites this incredible simulation from the University of Leeds.
The street harassment one.
Yeah, they had actors stage street harassment to see what bystanders would do. And the result? Men who stepped in to help the harassed woman were actually more likely to be reported to authorities than the men who did absolutely nothing.
Wait, reported for what? For helping.
For getting involved. For unwanted physical contact or aggression against the harasser.
That is wild.
Riker says it creates a freeze response. He uses the anecdote of a train conductor, Gregorio Cortez.
Oh, the guy who helped with the luggage.
Right. He was fired for helping an elderly woman with her bag. And the charge was invasion of space.
You try to help an old lady with her luggage, and you lose your job. So the message is basically stay away, do not engage.
The message is that your protective instinct is a liability. It's a risk. And then Riker shifts from chivalry to what he calls the glass cellar of work.
The work ethic war.
Exactly. We hear all the time about the glass ceiling keeping women out of corporate boardrooms.
Sure.
But Riker flips it. He talks about the glass cellar. The dirty, highly dangerous, completely invisible jobs that actually keep civilization running.
The mining, the logging, the deep sea fishing.
The jobs where people actually die.
Yeah.
Riker points out that the vast majority of workplace deaths are men. Yet we see massive funding for women's safety in safe corporate environments, while the men keeping the lights on are just ignored.
He tells that story about the Iron Tribe men in Yorkshire.
Yes, the men who formed a human chain in a flooded river to save a child.
And the media barely covered it.
That is exactly his point. Men risking their lives is expected, it's demanded, but it's rarely celebrated. It's treated as their disposable utility. But, he argues, if a man makes a woman feel unsafe with a joke in an office, it becomes a national crisis.
It really highlights his thesis on who the system is designed to protect and who it's designed to use.
Right.
And he says this extends to the legal system, too. He calls it the divorce industry.
The stats he pulls here are pretty brutal. He discusses how men lose nearly half their income post-divorce, while women often see a financial gain.
The love tax.
The love tax, yeah. The argument is that the legal system is a mechanism to extract resources from men. Marriage, in this view, is a high-risk contract where the state essentially acts as the enforcer against the husband.
So if we recap the landscape Riker has painted here for the learner listening, you're trapped in school, medicated for being a boy, erased from the history books, punished for helping people on the street, used up in dangerous jobs, and then fleeced in court.
It paints a very bleak picture.
It really does. So what does this all mean? Is Riker just telling men to give up?
Far from it. This is where the book pivots to the weapon aspect we mentioned in the intro. Riker proposes a solution. He calls it the survival shift.
Chapter 16. This is where he talks about what happens when the lights go out.
Exactly. Riker argues that all this bureaucratic control, this iron cage, completely relies on a functioning, comfortable society. The HR departments and the gender studies professors only exist because the power grid works.
But when the systems collapse.
Right, when the power grids fail, when riots happen. He mentions the Texas freeze or the UK fuel protests. The bureaucrats aren't the ones saving the day. It is the men with calloused hands.
He mentions that rancher Dale Thompson, who used his own diesel generator to save a community center during the Texas freeze.
Yes. Riker's view is that men need to prepare for this survival shift. He argues the world is becoming more volatile, and when the veneer of civilization cracks, the old virtues, strength, competence, stoicism, those become the only currency that matters.
And he advocates for what he calls the Iron Tribe.
The Iron Tribe, yeah.
I love that name. It sounds like something out of a movie, but he's talking about real organization here.
He is. He's talking about men organizing off-grid, rejecting the therapy circles and the safe spaces in favor of physical training, brotherhood, and actual skill building.
He mentions the men's sheds movement, too.
Right. Places where men just go to fix things and talk shoulder to shoulder. But he notes how even those spaces are under attack now for being exclusionary just because they're male only.
The brotherhood ban, he calls it. The idea that men congregating alone is inherently suspicious to the system.
But Riker says do it anyway. He champions a return to true stoicism. Not the repressed label the APA gives it, but actual stoicism.
Real men don't confess, they conquer. That's the quote.
Exactly. The solution isn't to ask for permission to be a man. It's to build the resilience and the skills so that you don't need permission in the first place.
It's about becoming undeniable. You don't ask for a seat at the table, you build your own table.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Riker is arguing for a parallel society. If the institutions are captured, if the schools and courts are actively against you, you don't waste your energy trying to reform them.
You build your own tribe, your own economy, your own support systems. Before we get to the final thought, I want to remind everyone listening, we are just scratching the surface of the data and the stories in this book. If this is resonating with you, if you feel like you are seeing the bars of that iron cage around you, you need to read the full text.
Definitely.
Go to Amazon Kindle, go to Google Play Books, and buy Bigotry, Leftist Ideologues Married to Marxist Utopianism by Conrad Riker. Support the author directly.
And you really should follow him on Substack, at Conrad Riker. That is where the ongoing updates are, the stuff that doesn't make it into the mainstream algorithms.
Yeah.
That's where his uncensored thought leadership is happening.
Okay, let's wrap this up with Riker's final stand. He poses a question to the reader that I think we should pose directly to you, the listener.
He does. The system, according to Riker, wants you broken, docile, and apologetic. It wants you to feel guilty for your own strength, but your refusal to submit is what makes you dangerous in the best possible way. So the question is, are you going to be the man who apologizes for his strength? Or are you going to be the man who rebuilds? And I'd add something to mull over that builds on Riker's thesis. If the iron cage relies entirely on the fragility of the modern grid, maybe the ultimate act of rebellion isn't just surviving the coming collapse. Maybe it's quietly welcoming it as the great reset of masculinity.
That is a powerful thought to end on. The learner who listens to this show knows that knowledge is power, but Riker is telling us that action is the only thing that actually matters.
Action, resilience, and brotherhood.
We're going to leave it right there. This has been a fascinating look into a very controversial but undeniably powerful source. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this deep dive. Help us spread the message. And go get the book on Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Stay strong.